17-piece Baycrest cookware set. High-quality stainless steel construction makes this set fast cooking and easy to clean. On sale now at only $139.99. Come on, Canada. Meet you at the Bay's Housewares Fair.
Good morning. Truth is stranger than fiction. Bill Vander Zalm has got the gall to run as mayor of Vancouver. Even though as Minister of Municipal Affairs, he was the guy who wanted to wipe out the powers of city councils and municipalities. He's the man who quit social credit, I say, because he thought Bennett was going to be slaughtered and he could become the new leader of the party. He's the man with an incredibly mixed political career. And he's the man who made this announcement yesterday among the weeds at Bota Gardens.
Therefore, today, in beautiful, sunny Richmond, just on the outskirts of Vancouver, in one of the loveliest gardens anywhere, I'm announcing my candidacy for Mayor of Vancouver.
Pick up your microphone, Willie, and prepare to go to work at the minimum wage. Also in the studio this morning, I have a man who is looking for trouble. All his life he looked for trouble. All his life he found it. From the Korean War to being an eyewitness at the assassination of Lee Harvey Oswald by Jack Ruby. A man who at one time was called by Joe Clark, his name is Peter Worthington, of course, an enemy of democracy. One of the few conservatives actually defeated in the last election he's disliked so much by his own party. Peter Worthington it is, but first it's Willie Vander Zalm after the break. First, let me set the stage. The executive of the Non-Partisan Association, absolutely bereft of any possible candidate. George Pugh hasn't got the guts to run. He was about the only one on council. They looked around and they found a willing, if apparently reluctant, political bride, Bill Vander Zalm. And his history is convoluted, to say the least. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bill. Just let's go through it so that people can get the flavor.
Keep going.
First, you were an alderman in Surrey, right? Then you were mayor of Surrey, right?
Correct.
And you were a big-time Liberal at the time, weren't you?
Yes.
And you made a pitch to be Liberal leader and you lost, correct?
Yes.
And then you went to social credit.
Yes.
And in social credit you became alternatively, in turn, the Minister of Human Resources.
Yes.
The Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Yes.
And the Minister of Education.
Correct.
And is it not a fact, witness, that when you were Minister of Municipal Affairs, you came out of a cabinet meeting and called Mr. Bennett and all his colleagues gutless because they killed your new strictures on the powers of municipalities? Is that correct?
Words to that effect, but for the way it was dealt with, yes.
Okay. And then along came the election and you were convinced that the NDP was going to sweep the province.
No.
Why, therefore, why did you not run in the last election? Was it not because that you were going to come in as the knight in shining armor, never see anything but behind a man's face you can't say to his face, and become the new leader of the opposition and future Premier of BC?
No, that was not at all the intent. I quit, as I mentioned then, that for the reasons that I wanted to get a rest from it, number one, to put my business in order, and to be with the family, and also, of course, to get away from some of the frustrations I experienced.
Right. Okay, you were sick and tired of social credit.
No, I was sick and tired of some of the frustrations, perhaps.
And then you decided to run for mayor of Vancouver.
Yes.
Have you bought a house in Vancouver yet?
Not yet.
Are you required to live in Vancouver to be its mayor?
No, you're not.
Do you know where Granville Mall is?
Yes, I do.
You do know where Granville Mall is. Why were George Pugh and the other NPA stalwarts not at your press conference yesterday morning? Because my understanding is that many of them had learned that you were not going to run as of yesterday morning.
No, there was a lot of speculation, no doubt, and I'll grant you I didn't make up my mind till perhaps very near the end, but I wanted to have it on my own.
On your own?
On my own.
Are you seeking the endorsement of the Non-Partisan Association?
Yes, I have their endorsement.
You have their endorsement
Yes, I
now?
do. Yes.
Are you prepared to put up the non-refundable $6,000, which you must do before you can become their candidate to their campaign funds?
Yes, but as I understand it, money has already come in. It doesn't have to come from the candidate directly. It can be contributed.
Who has contributed the $6,000 on your behalf?
I don't even know if it's been contributed yet, but certainly it's something that I'll be discussing. If it's required to be paid by me, it'll be paid by me. If it's required to be paid by, or if it can be paid by others and they wish to contribute, fine and dandy too. I'll certainly have my expense.
Would you let other people put up $6,000 for you to run?
If they wish to contribute to the campaign, I have no objection to that.
That's almost as bad as Pierre Trudeau's swimming pool when we never did learn who put up the money.
There's no requirement by candidates. I'm sure you know that Mayor Harcourt will obviously get his contribution from the civic employees, from the unions, from the labor movement, and I'll get it from other sources as well. Hopefully maybe some of those included, directly perhaps.
Next
Certainly
question.
not from them as an organization.
How many people signed your petition that you insisted on? You lay back there on the bridal bed and said, I won't run, I won't participate unless people really flock to my support. How many people signed the petitions?
Well, it's not quite as you said it in any event, but other than that...
where am I wrong?
Well...
You said, I won't run unless there's a draft Vander Zalm movement.
No. What I said is I want to know that, number one, you have an excellent slate, and I was assured of that. And number two, that there's adequate support and that you'll get out the workers. And I'm convinced that they have a tremendous amount of support and that they'll get out an enormous amount of workers.
Willie,
Yes.
how many names were on the petition?
There's 2,500 to 3,000 petitions in circulation. Many have already been returned. However, the day for returning the petitions was today.
I see. So you, without even knowing how many, you decided to go.
I know roughly just what the results have been, not only from the petitions that have come back, not only from the many, many phone calls, but also letters. I have a fair idea as to what the support out.
You realize many of the names...
I was not playing the number game.
You realize many of the names in the petition were signed by Harcourt supporters because some dreadful Jack Monroe signed the petition. I mean, and he hates your guts.
I don't know whether he signed the petition.
You know that I
didn't
asked
see
people
his
on the
name
air
it.
to sign the petition because it looked so awful, you sitting coyly in the wings waiting for a draft movement.
As a matter of fact, I have to thank you for that. That was the best bit of publicity we've ever had, and our phone number is known to many Vancouverites now who've since phoned in and said we want to be part of it, especially if that nasty Jack Webster is anti-bill.
But these were NDPers who were saying that, you fool, Willie.
No, they weren't. I could tell they sounded wonderful.
In other words, you had decided to go and you've gone. And you're going on a red baiting campaign. Is that your principal plank in your platform?
No, it's not.
We'll get to his platform, if any. Willie Vander Zalm. Have you bought a place in Vancouver yet?
I'm in the process.
False Creek?
I'm looking at various locations, but I'll probably get a piece of lawn and some garden.
After the break. Platform. Just, you tell me. You must have got a platform prepared of some kind. You're not going to ad-lib your platform all the way through, are you? In fact, you're committed to the NPA platform.
Well, since you started out with the suggestion that I was red baiting, which certainly isn't the intention, I don't intend to pursue that. It has come out. It probably will come out.
It'll haunt you all through the campaign.
Possibly.
If I don't do it, Erickson and York and Rankin will do it.
Of course they will.
And there may well be some truth in it.
Sure. But
Maybe there'll be some truth in the fact that you're going to have a red baiting campaign.
Sure. Maybe there will be some of that.
You are going to conduct a red baiting campaign?
No, but I'm certainly going to bring out some of those things that are obviously of concern to people.
Okay, now is the time.
And that may be viewed as red baiting.
Attack York, Erickson, Rankin, Davis, the Cope, and Harcourt. Harcourt is a tool of the lefties, isn't he?
Sad-sounding situation.
Is Harcourt a tool of the lefties?
Well, he's certainly left. He doesn't make any bones about that. We know that he
How
sought
far
the
left
leadership.
do you think he is?
Oh, I think he's considerably left of center. He's not as left as the others you've mentioned. I think he's a much more reasonable person than the list you started out with. But obviously, there will be some of that. There will be those issues discussed which they'll raise, or somebody else which you'll consider as red baiting.
Why you raised them?
You started out. I said,
all right.
follow up on that.
What do you think of Harry Rankin's performance on council? You've been monitoring the council very closely.
I'm not too impressed with council. I'm sure for those that have watched council proceedings on Channel 10, they'll agree it's a bit of a circus, a comic opera, to say the least. However, I think, number one, the issue has to be Vancouver. And this probably is where the council has failed miserably, in that they've really not dealt with the Vancouver issues. If you consider all of the things that have happened in Vancouver during the last several years, they've been provincial or federal initiatives. And the mayor and the majority of council have been opposed to all of those things. They're now out there saying, oh, well, we love ALRT, we love transit, it's wonderful. They want to be a part of Expo. They want to be a part and be associated with BC Place, all of these things. But they were opposed to these things initially. The big issue, of course, over the next several years is not only how do we prepare for Expo, how do we deal with Expo once it's here, but what do we do after Expo? And I think that's where a mammoth job of organizing comes into place. And frankly, I don't believe this council is capable of dealing with a $250 million budget, let alone with all of the intricacies and all of the things associated with Expo 86 and the 100th birthday of Vancouver.
Good. Nice little speech. Do you approve of the fact that the Civic Council declared that Vancouver is a nuclear-free city?
Well, they've declared Vancouver as a nuclear-free city. They now have a plebiscite on the go for cruise missiles testing.
To stop cruise missile testing.
That's right. And there's a motion before council that Vancouver be declared a battleship-free zone, so that the Canadian Navy can't enter the harbor.
All right, tell me first, what do you think of the nuclear-free city declaration?
Well, you know, you can't be against a nuclear freeze. You can't be against nuclear weapons, against war. You can't be but for peace. But to try and con the people, to say that every council meeting somehow must get involved in these issues, and that we, the Council of Vancouver, can resolve all of these world problems and deal with it not nationally, but right here in Vancouver City Council chamber, that's a con job.
All right, what about the cruise missile? Is that another con job? Plebiscite, November 17th.
I think much of that is a con job. They're trying to at least, certainly, apparently, take in some people and have them believe that somehow the Vancouver City Council can bring change into this. Now, mind you,
and do you think it's the lefties on council that do this all the time?
Individuals on council, individuals everywhere ought to take a stand. But to have it, you know, by way of plebiscite and such and give the people false comfort, I think that's a bit of a
All
problem.
right, looking at your background and your minimum wage attitude, you think you can get people to work easily for the minimum wage?
No, I've never had people working for the minimum wage.
You had Bruce Erickson working for the minimum wage out digging manure at $3 an hour in those days.
Bruce wouldn't take the job.
One of his people did.
I offered Bruce, but some of his people did, and they were paid more than a minimum wage.
All right, if bids come to City Council for awarding of contracts, will you always go for the lowest bid, especially if it's non-union?
I'll go for the lowest bid. That certainly is the policy, and that ought to be the policy and should be implemented.
What is your opinion of City Council's position taken a year ago that there would be no layoffs at Vancouver City Hall regardless?
Well, I think to say regardless is a bit ridiculous.
That's what they
but
said.
Certainly,
the priority would be not to lay anybody off in times of crisis.
Well, I agree that we shouldn't be laying off people in times of crisis. If there's a way of perhaps cutting back on cost through not replacing positions lost through the attrition process, fine. But I don't agree that we should be laying people off during these difficult times.
Just on the red baiting to get out of the way, what did you think of Harcourt's performance when Kissinger was here and he wanted the rebels on the same podium?
Well, it's terrible. It's ridiculous.
Childish.
Childish, ridiculous. Similarly, for Bruce Erickson to, at the P&E dinner where there was a toast to the President of the United States because they had all of the dignitaries there from both countries in honor to honor the opening of the event, for him to sit down when they play the American anthem. I think such tactics are terrible. You just don't do that. We are the greatest, the most beautiful city in the whole of North America. For the next 2 years, all eyes will be focused on Vancouver.
Good.
People like this, yes, it's really
Absolutely.
terrible.
No couth at all, these people, have they?
Well, they certainly lack it when they should be displaying it.
Now, one other major problem you would have if you were elected mayor. How can you deal with your enemy, Mr. Bennett, Premier of the province of BC?
He's no enemy of mine. I've always had a good rapport with the Premier, with the Cabinet, with the government, and I intend to continue
Except for the
that.
odd fight you had with them.
I've had my quarrels, I've had my differences. The difference between Bill Vander Zalm and a lot of other people is that I don't mind being public or open about some of these things.
Yeah, you're fairly frank.
Yes.
You haven't got a platform, so we'll forget that.
No, that's not true. What would you like to know specifically?
How many city council meetings have you attended?
I have not attended Vancouver City Council meetings. I have attended, of course, many city council meetings during my time. I've chaired many meetings. I've not been a part of Vancouver City Council, correct?
And you're willing to give up your retirement with your wealth and get into this arena?
Well, I think it's a worthy fight, and particularly during these next several years, we're going to need the sort of organization, leadership, the type of...
And do you think that the aquarium expansion should be stopped? They're trying to steal some of the green grass in Stanley Park, the fools. Should that be stopped?
Well, this is a decision for the Parks Board.
Oh, no, it's not. It's a decision for the council.
No, it's a decision for the Parks Board. They are an autonomous body. They have been given these monies
In other words,
from the federal government and through private donors.
If they decided to log all the trees off in Stanley Park, that would be all right? Their decision?
No, I imagine they would have a difficult time raising monies to log off trees.
They could sell them and build more whirlpools. Look, this morning, you have at Willie. I've been a little light-hearted with him. I don't take him quite seriously yet. Perhaps I'm wrong. I don't take Harcourt seriously either, but that's something else again. Do you want Willie to run for mayor, and can he win? After the break. People want to talk to you from all over the province. You should be running for Premier, Willie. We're going to take the calls cold this morning.
Good.
And you're going to deal with them briefly. And if they wander or waffle, hang up on them. Is that clear?
I don't have control over that switchboard.
Just you tell me. Go ahead. What do you think of Vander Zalm running for mayor of Vancouver?
Is it me, Jack?
Yes, you.
Okay. I have two bones to pick with the present mayor and council, and I'd like to hear Mr. Vander Zalm's views. The first one is I think they have disastrously neglected the road system in Vancouver. I think we need a much more efficient road system in and out and through and around downtown, connecting with major arteries. And the other is I think they have really blown False Creek. It could have been a beautiful park recreational complex. They're turning it over to condos.
Okay. Cities, roads, and False Creek.
Well, certainly, as far as the roads are concerned, there's a lot of work to be done, but much work has been done. We do have a traffic problem on many of the very busy...
You can ask the provincial government for more money for the
Yes,
arterial
well,
highways.
they've already agreed to come along with CASCR. I can assure you my chances with both the federal and the provincial government will be far better than what
That's
Harcourt's
right,
might
because you
have
were a Liberal, you still are a social creditor, and now you're an NPA. Your chances are better. False Creek, that's beautiful, isn't it?
Well, False Creek, I agree with the gentleman.
Harcourt has
but
done a good job.
I don't think we can blame Harcourt for all of that. Much of it was proceeded with much before him.
What was his name again? Art
Phillips?
Phillips. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know what Mr. Vander Zalm would do if he was mayor about the pornography problem in Vancouver.
Good question.
Well, certainly, again, that has been dealt with by council, and I agree that I would continue to pursue that. I certainly feel that there's certain basic things that could be done with respect to where you display some of those materials or how they're displayed. And
I gather, generally speaking, you're against pornography, but you don't know how to stop it.
Well, you know that, but well, how to stop it, I think you can certainly minimize it. Much of it will be for provincial and federal actions.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, no, I don't think that Bill Vander Zalm should be running for the mayor of the city of Vancouver. And the reason I think he's got no interest in Vancouver at all. The only interest he has is for his own self, to get himself before the people, and his own selfish self to keep himself before the people so that he can run for the provincial government when it comes time to run. That's the only reason I think he's running.
Mr. Vander Zalm?
Well, it's hard to argue with this gentleman. He obviously isn't aware, as you mentioned, that I'm coming out of working in the garden, or being in somewhat of a retirement phase, although it's never been such. I've been busier than ever, but I'm going out of my way to fight the fight and fight it well.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm all for Bill Vander Zalm becoming mayor.
Good, thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. First of all, I want to bring up a point. Last provincial elections, Mr. Harcourt took out a full-page ad in the paper telling the people of Vancouver to vote NDP. It took me 4 days to get through to him. Finally, he returned my call. He admitted it, and I told him that as far as being mayor of Vancouver next election, to forget it.
Well, you must have known he was an NDP, and you shouldn't have been in the least surprised.
But it's not his position to tell the people of Vancouver who to vote for.
Free country.
I know it's a free country, but he's supposed to be like Caesar's wife, above reproach.
You could be living in another world, old boy. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Vander Zalm.
Good morning, sir.
Mr. Vander Zalm, I really look forward to you running as the mayor. I was a resident of Surrey when you were mayor during that time, and I respect what you're doing. However, I would like to see you do one thing, sir. The NPA has taken on the position that they have taken with the aquarium. What is your opinion of what should be done with the aquarium?
Well, first of all, Jack has already asked this. I'm not familiar with the whole of the issue in that I don't know what all of the alternatives. I understand, of course, that one alternative was to, in fact, build at Oceanside. And that sounded to me, because I am, after all, a naturalist. I love plants and flowers and green grass, so I don't want to see any of it destroyed. It sounded to me like a reasonable option. But on the other hand, I've not had the benefit of the information that has been with the Parks Commissioners.
He'll make up his mind in due course if he's elected.
No, the Parks Commissioners do have the powers to make those decisions, and you'll note the council to date hasn't really entered that issue, the mayor nor the members of council.
Right.
May have to, thank you.
May have to.
What's that thing called, the building permit? The building permit.
The development permit.
Development permit. That comes finally from the City Hall if the public interest is truly threatened.
Yeah.
By the way, are you going to conduct the meetings in the City Council in both languages?
No.
No.
No. Did you want it in both languages?
I thought you might have changed your views from the bad old days and be quite prepared to have simultaneous translation for Vancouver City Council to make friends in Quebec. No need for
Well, is this a motion on the floor of council now? I wouldn't
No.
be so. Oh, I see.
It's only on the motion on the floor from me. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack, you want to know if Mr. Vander Zalm can win.
Yeah.
I think he can not only win, he can help us restore some civic pride and give us some leadership in business again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See, you might be right, I might be wrong. Unusual though that is. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to say that I would not like to see this Socrat hack escape from the bog of Socrat sleaze. I've had enough of Socrats, and I am sick and tired of Willie Vander Zalm, especially with the Pope show. I don't want to see him as mayor. Goodbye, Billy.
The man is against everything. He's against the Pope. He's against the social credit.
Go ahead, please. From Kitty Matt.
Definite no.
Oh, Kitimat.
There's a chance I might be going back down to Vancouver, and I definitely would not want to see Wee Willie in power.
Oh.
I go back to the days when I was living there, and I remember when he says, bring a shovel, and we brought a shovel, and there was no job, so he lies. So I have no confidence in Wee Willie.
Well, Kitimat.
Didn't want to interrupt him. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how Bill Vander Zalm can be running in Vancouver when as municipal affairs minister, when the vote came down for a ward system here in Vancouver, it was over 50%. It was a majority, and Bill Vander Zalm and his cronies over in Victoria shut down Vancouver's plans for a ward system.
Oh, great question. Great question.
Yeah.
Are you in favor of a ward system?
No, I'm not in favor of
As
a
mayor
ward
of Vancouver,
system.
you will campaign against it?
No, I will only argue it But if council decides that they wish to proceed with the ward system based on the vote they have at present, I'll take their case forth and take it forth well. But personally, no, I'm not for the ward system.
What's wrong with democracy in a ward system?
Well, how do you see this as democracy? If I live in Vancouver East, here I am, a good, free, enterprising Italian or whatever ethnic person. I want to associate or communicate with someone of a like philosophy, possibly someone who understands my language. The only person I can turn to is Bruce Erickson. That's the only representative for that particular area. I don't see that as democracy. I think in a Vancouver City Council, you should be able to turn to the mayor or any of the aldermanic people and have them help you.
Bill,
whatever the situation.
What do we do for the House of Commons? We elect one member.
Example?
It's the best we got. It's democracy.
Well, I know.
We elect one member for one area.
And you're dealing with massive areas, very large areas. But in a city, certainly you should have the opportunity to go
there are 9 ridings in the city of Vancouver with about nine separate MPs.
And if I live in the Vancouver city and have a problem, I want to go to Gordon Campbell or George Puel or Brian Calder.
Gordon Campbell?
Well, he'll be a member of council after the election.
You mean the guy that used to be Philip's secretary?
He's a
the guy who ran
candidate.
that NPA meeting where there was no voting of delegates from the floor, where the list was prepared in the back room. 10 people. Wow.
Not true, but anyway, fine.
That is true.
No, it's true.
Why didn't you run Fred Kavanagh, the candidate most likely to win, because he's too loud and won't follow the NPA line?
No, I understood Fred declined on the 23rd of September. That's the information
One more short segment with the incredible
Fred.
I like him too,
like
but
Fred.
I also like you.
Oh, thank you.
And I play golf with Harcourt.
I can hardly tell.
I'm non-partisan. One more short segment with Willie Vander Zalm. Take it away. Bill Vander Zalm, quite seriously, is having a bash at Mayor of Vancouver against Harcourt, who is well entrenched. How much of your own money are you going to put up for? What will the campaign cost you?
I can't tell you what it'll cost. Certainly there's a cost. We know that you can't be involved in this sort of campaign and not run up a lot of bills regardless of who you are. But I don't know what the figures will be.
You plan to use your old social credit contacts to bring out the vote?
Oh, we'll probably get all the help we can. We're not discriminating against social credit, NDP, or any other party group that wants to come forth and assist in the campaign. They have every right to, and I hope they will.
You won't mind if you're called the social credit candidate for Mayor of Vancouver?
I am not the social credit candidate for
Mayor
Mayor of
social
Vancouver.
credit candidate for Mayor of Vancouver?
I happen to be a member of the Social Credit Party in British Columbia.
So it's now a party fight.
Fine.
We're now going to continue the polarization.
I should hope it wouldn't be a party fight.
NDP versus social credit.
No, it shouldn't be, though.
Harcourt
it's
NDP.
Vancouver that matters.
What does that mean, Willie?
Well, we don't have to get into those party line
Well,
debates.
you're going to raise the red baiting issue with Erickson
No,
and
I
York.
said it will be raised. No
And you'll
doubt.
raise it.
No, I won't go out of my way to raise it, but it will be raised.
They'll raise it and you'll respond, and it'll be the principal feature of the campaign.
It could become a big feature in the campaign. Hopefully it won't.
Irrelevant and disturbing and of no real consequence.
That's right.
Except you want all the lefties off council.
Well, you know there are too many lefties on council, and not only left, they're so far left you can hardly find them. So we hope to...
Name the ones that are so far left you can hardly find them.
You know, that's, I suppose... I don't know how many of them have membership in the Communist Party, but you know Bruce York does.
Yeah. Call from Sechelt. This guy's moving to Vancouver for the campaign. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just about feel like it, too. It's great, great news, Bill. You'll make a fine mayor for BC, and I'm tickled pink that you're running. I would like to make one comment, if I can. If it was under your control and you had some control over the bus strike and other essential services, how would you handle it?
Yes.
Well, I think it dragged on far too long. But mind you, I have a bit of a bias here because I was involved with transit for some considerable time. And frankly, I think I can honestly say that I knew there was bad feelings between management and labor, and I think it should have been addressed a long while ago. I'm pleased with some of the changes that have been introduced now, and hopefully these sort of animosities that have existed for a good while can be overcome. I think we have to have a good rapport between management and the people that are driving the buses every day out there on the street facing the public.
What would you have done a couple of years ago when Harcourt was mayor, when the striking garbage workers dumped the garbage down at the door of the City Hall? Remember that one?
Yes, yes, I would not stand for that sort of thing. I don't think anyone should.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
First of all, I want to tell you that I think you're great. You seem to be the only opposition that's survived the new reality.
Oh, wait till we get going on Mulroney. Oh.
To Vander Zalm running for any position in this province, I'm against that emphatically. I think we've had enough of the social credit mafia, and that's about all I want to say. Thank you, sir. Keep up the good work.
He's not against me
And
running for anything.
no, no.
He just doesn't want me to get
And
elected.
this is one of the guys who phoned you, who phoned the NPA and said he supported you so that you had no idea of the real measure of support.
You know, you said he was from Seashelt.
No,
we
no.
didn't get any calls from Seashelt.
Willie,
I know we didn't.
No, you got to be brighter. Seashelt was the call before. Go ahead, please.
Yes, glad you're running, Bill.
Thank you.
I hope that you win. You're a damn good politician, and we need a little free enterprise down at City Hall.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. And I pray that Bill Vander Zalm will not run and will not win, and he cannot win, not in British Columbia.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
He's running.
Bill, I'm all for you.
Thank you.
You'll make a great mayor. If Jack would just keep quiet a little while, we'd hear what you have to say. Also, it will be nice to see a mayor with a good head of hair.
And handsome to boot. Lillian could win in a walk.
Yes, he could. Lillian sends her regards, incidentally. She wanted to be with you today, Jack, but she's home looking after the...
Tell her I'm happily married 45 years. Will you? Go ahead, please.
Sir, I am just so thrilled that Mr. Vander Zalm is running, and I hope that God blesses him because it is a thankless job.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Bill Vander Zalm.
Good morning.
You are determination plus for Vancouver City Hall. Would you be having better relations with school board and parks board than Mayor Harcourt at present time?
Well, I certainly feel that there should be good liaison at all times between the school board, the council, the parks boards. All of those autonomous bodies in the city certainly need to pull together on a lot of issues. And you know, it's important that we know who the candidates in the election for school board. I think we certainly have to become aware during the next 6 weeks about what their platform. They spend a lot of money too.
In other words, the atmosphere is going to be different than the time you were booed down by the BC teachers at the meeting.
Oh, I've had my difficulties with the BC teachers, you know that. But, you know, I think looking back on it now, Jack, you, like most other people, would agree what I was saying then, what I was trying to do back as early as 1975 in cutting back on cost or costly programs was necessary. Had it been done then, we perhaps wouldn't face some of the problems we do today.
Some truth in that. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, as Human Resources Minister, Vander Zalm went to war against the poor. As Municipal Affairs Minister, he went to war against the democracy of regional districts. And as Education Minister, he went to war against the autonomy of school boards. And I'm wondering, if he becomes mayor, is he going to go to war against the people of Vancouver? Also, he said something about battleships.
Well, can I answer that?
I just think that shows Vander Zalm's total ignorance of every issue facing City Council. And I signed his petition because I want to see him humiliated.
What, I didn't believe what he said in the first place, so I can't believe the latter part either. However...
But he was very good, though. You went to war against the poor. You went to war against education, and you went to war against the municipalities to take away all their powers with your land use act.
No, I've never gone to war, and certainly I've never attacked the people. I've always been on the side of the people.
You're the biggest enemy of democracy in this province.
And I've always been a great supporter of democracy, will continue to be, but I don't mind facing other governmental bodies and saying it as it is. And I've done that a good many times. And if the gentleman would only look back and consider some of the things that I was involved with that caused a considerable amount of controversy. I think he has to agree that the final results, the outcome of what I was proposing then, was right. Look at transit. A great deal of controversy about transit. Now everybody's saying, wonderful, Vancouver's getting transit. It is wonderful. If that decision hadn't been made then, we'd still be studying transit today, and you know it.
Okay. You're familiar with the alert issue because people are still raising the question of the cost of alert versus the cost of conventional rapid transit. Alert is just a system foisted on this city by the Socreds.
Okay, leave it at that. Put him down as an enemy.
Yes, yes.
This will be the first of a number of interviews between thee and me. I don't know if you've got any candidates I can put on the air, have you?
Yes, we have wonderful candidates for the NPA, both for school board, council, and parks board, and I would like to bring them on air, Jack. I think you'd see that we probably have the strongest candidates we've ever had.
It would have been more impressive if you'd been flanked by the candidates yesterday instead of looking like a guy who really had been rejected by his associates in advance.
I'm sorry, I don't get that. You'll have to explain.
All right, you made your little thing at the Bota Gardens on your own.
Yes.
Who was there with you? Jack Davis was there.
Well, Jack
And the woman that sells the stuff in Bota Gardens was there.
Yes, and a lot of people, and a lot of visitors from the U.S. and other places were strolling around looking at the flowers. Yeah. True enough.
But not one of your non-partisan colleagues took the time to come out and be a battery of support for you as you declared your nomination. Not one.
It was my choice that I do it myself.
It looked as if they didn't want to be with you, Willie, like you had body odor or something.
No, it was my choice, Jack. I assure you, they're a wonderful group. We get along well. We had a meeting yesterday.
You and Bellamy get along well?
Yes, I've always gotten along with Don
George Puel get on well?
George Puel, I love him. He's a good fighter, a great guy, and I know he'll top the polls.
Vander Zalm's in the ring. Enough said. I'm going to talk to Peter Worthington next, looking for trouble after the break. You know Peter Worthington. Peter Worthington was one of the guys who started the Toronto Sun. Peter Worthington is a foreign correspondent who has been everywhere and done everything. Peter Worthington is a politician. Peter Worthington is a right-wing Tory. Peter Worthington is one of the few Tories who couldn't win in the last election because he's such a difficult character to get along with. How do you plead?
Oh, I plead innocent. I'm very easy to get along with, so long as you do what's right.
I want you to, before we turn to your book, Looking for Trouble, let's talk politics for a little while, eh?
Yeah, I might say that in the area I ran in Broadview Greenwood, there's a petition to get me to run for mayor of Vancouver.
Well, you might as well. Characters are always welcome. But what do you think about Mulroney's performance up to now?
As Prime Minister?
Yep.
I think it's hard to tell because he hasn't done very much, but I think the moves are in the right direction. I think the cabinet is basically a sensible one. Joe Clark as External Affairs leaves me speechless. But I think his ideas in the military are sensible. I think it's you have to wait and see. I hope Mulroney has a philosophy. I hope it isn't going to be the politics of pragmatism. In politics, pragmatism very quickly becomes opportunism, and so the last thing we need is more opportunists.
Don't you think it will be the politics of pragmatism, that he will be a modified version of the Liberals as the establishment swallows him, and that there will be very little in the way of any conservative moves by this government in the next couple of years?
Well, I think if he falls in the hands of the Davis Conservatives and Ormy Atkinses and things, it's going to become like, Canada will become like Ontario, motivated by pragmatism and staying in power rather than a vision and a philosophy taking Canada in a certain direction. I think British Columbia is unusual in that you have a premier that has a philosophy and has a goal. I think Trudeau was unusual in that he had a vision for Canada. It was totally out of line with what Canadians wanted and terribly destructive to the country, but it was certainly a vision or a philosophy. I don't see what Mulroney's is yet. I hope he develops a conservative one.
Now, do we have any decent conservative newspapers in this country which reflect your views? I mean, you were the editor of the Toronto Sun.
Yeah, I was, but I'm not sure the Sun even reflected all my views. But we have not really.
Do you think that the media in this country does a good job of representing to the people of this country what's happening in the country? Television, radio, or newspapers?
I suspect we have the worst press gallery in the Western world, in the free world. I think the media in this country has been totally inept. We never dig up anything. We like to say in Canada that Watergate could never happen here because of our system. The fact, it's quite true. Watergate couldn't happen here because our media would never find it. And we have all kinds of scandals going on in this country, or have had in the past 2 decades, and nobody has unearthed them. We can't get at them. We know they're there, and yet they get too complicated, and we go on to them, and our media doesn't get into them.
And do you believe that the press gallery in Ottawa merely reflects the unspoken wishes of the government in power?
No, I think it regurgitates. I think basically the press gallery, if it gets a controversial statement, it's he says and a reaction from the NDP, a reaction from the opposition, and let it stand. There's no analysis, there's no thinking that goes on, and there's no digging. There's no digging into the CANDU reactors, there's no digging into the uranium scandal, there's no digging into the emergency planning order that'll set up internment camps in this country. There's no analysis or concern that we had a federal government that's trying to harbor more and more power into itself, make Canada into a state capitalistic, which is indistinguishable from socialism.
I didn't accept that emergency powers thing of yours. I didn't believe on the face of it that the government has taken power to set up internment camps. Can you justify that statement?
It's an order in council implemented by the Prime Minister that in a crisis or an emergency, the government can occupy every facet of the economy. The Prime Minister's office would be responsible for taking over the media, the press, and these outlets. The Solicitor General has the authority to set up internment camps for the civilian population. My question is why, in the spring of 1981, do we need this legislation when we've got a War Measures Act, which we fought a war simultaneously against Japan, Germany, and Italy? Why do we need suddenly this new order in council, which we have now?
Can it be accepted by a reasonable person as merely something that will lie on a shelf until after the nuclear holocaust?
Well, the question is why would we implement it, and why would the Prime Minister at the time bring this order in council?
Doesn't it say why and when we would implement it?
For an emergency or a crisis of his definition. That's what you want. That's what the Polish government has when they want to implement martial law. What crisis does he see coming up where he's going to have to implement it, or he decides on the crisis? I don't think it's the thing we want to have in a democracy or a democratic leader, or certainly not a democratic dictatorship like we had under Trudeau.
Fair enough, talking about Trudeau and Mulroney just for 1 minute more. Do you think that Mulroney may be fooled by the fact that he thinks he won an election?
Yes. I think the worst thing that could happen to the Conservatives, and I'm one who wanted a Conservative government, is this massive majority, because politicians being what they are and human nature being what it is, they'll soon think that they are in that position because the people favored them rather than the people were reacting against something. And really the lucky one is John Turner, of course, if he were the right person.
Yeah, why would he be lucky?
Well, I think he's got the electorate did his work for him, and they cleaned out the rot and the mediocrity in the Liberal Party, and he's left with a certain amount of raw material. And he now is in the same position that Lougheed was in before the Tories came to power, and he can remake the party, the Liberal Party, in his image, or in the direction that in the way that he wants it, if he had personality and if he were that kind of a leader, which I don't think he is, but if he were, he could do it.
Surely what's left of the Liberal establishment on Bay Street will dump him.
Well, he's the leader. It depends. He can go to the... I would leave the Liberal establishment and go to the people and remake his own party. There are an awful lot of Liberals out there. The majority of the people vote Liberal in this country, if they have an excuse to do it. He can give them the excuse.
Enough is enough. Let's get to your book. I tend to get pedestrian when I'm talking to... You're a member of the Eastern Media Mafia, by the way.
Who?
You are.
I'm Eastern. Oh, I'm more Western than Eastern in attitude. The Eastern media doesn't like me much.
Well, I despise most of them, as you may know. And I've been known to say so on a number of occasions.
Don't think much of
You're
it.
not really one of them. You're from Toronto. Is that the east?
Oh, Toronto's east, but I lived in Vancouver before you did, Jack.
Oh?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, your father lived here?
No, my father was stationed. He was a soldier, but I went.
Your father was
to
the famous
university
General
here.
Worthington, who led our forces in Korea.
No, he was never in Korea. He was retired then. He was a tank soldier. He brought
He was
tanks
around
into
at the
Canada.
time of the Korean War.
No. I was, but he wasn't, and I wasn't
It's
a
you
general.
that was in Korea. What
Yeah,
was your
that's right.
rank in the army?
I was a lieutenant, and I went in. I was of the generation that couldn't wait to go to war in the 40s, when the war was as popular as the anti-war movement became in the 60s. So I went into the Navy underage and went into the Fleet Air Arm, and then was discharged in BC, stayed here, and then went into the Korean War.
First newspaper job was where?
The Vancouver province.
On the old province?
I wanted to be a sports reporter. They wouldn't let me. It was too important, so I had to cover news. And for years tried to get into sports, but...
What year was that?
54.
What do you mean before I was here? I was in Vancouver in 1947.
Well, I came in 46.
Said he. We'll get down to some of Peter's choice anecdotes after the break. I'm jealous of Worthington because Worthington's been everywhere and done everything. I've been a few places and done a few odds and ends, but never been in the heart of all the troubles. Tell me about the time you were in Dallas after Kennedy was assassinated. A newspaperman's dream. Tell me about it. It's in the book. It's a great story.
The interesting part of it was that you know, the Telegram and the Star are great rivals. When Kennedy was assassinated, the Telegram, I went down to Washington like everybody else, but we had left Dallas clear. The Star had sent a reporter down, Ray Corelli, who's a he's a sort of Jack Webster of the newspaper, of the Star, their top guy, who was covering the Dallas thing. We had left Dallas free when we realized that the story had shifted to Dallas from after Kennedy's body came back. I caught the midnight plane Saturday night to go to Dallas. A milk run arrived in Dallas about 8 or 9 in the morning and intended to sleep until the evening when Ruby was going to be, or Oswald was going to be transferred from the jail. But anyway, wandered down to look the scene over before going to sleep and wandered into the Dallas police station and virtually into the transfer of
Lee Harvey
Oswald. And in the middle of this, was tied up with the detectives, with them. No security check, no questions or anything. And I asked where he was going. They said they were taking him down to the jail, but they're going to have a decoy car going down Main Street, and they were going to cut over to Commerce. Anyway, when Ruby popped out and shot him, my immediate reaction was that it was one of the journalists who had done it. And the initial thought was, my God, he spoiled it for the rest of us. Unbeknownst to me, back in Toronto, everybody's looking at this scene, and the Star is looking at it and saying, where's our guy? Where's Corelli? There's the telegram. They said, well, let's phone his hotel. They said, oh, he won't be in his hotel. He'll be there. So they phone the hotel where he's sleeping and wake him up. He gives them hell for waking him up. And they say, well, you better get down to the police station. Oswald's just been shot. The telegram is there. And the interesting thing from a journalistic point of view, they suspended Corelli, who'd been working around the clock on the story, which I thought was an appalling thing to do. You know,
Most unfair.
Terribly unfair.
He'd been up night and day covering the story, had gone to bed on the Sunday morning, was catching up in his sleep. You come in by sheer happenstance from the rival newspaper and walk in without checking into the Dallas police station.
Yeah, exactly. But the interesting thing is, while I think it's an unfair thing to do, and the telegram would never have done that, but the telegram folded and the Star survived.
Yeah.
So the
brutality wins.
Well, ruthlessness and a certain amount of...
Did you actually see this fat little gangster thug fella, Ruby, point the gun and fire?
Yeah, he came out, he was about 4 or 5 feet away, and but everybody's forgotten at that time is that on the streets where people were lined up waiting to see this entourage go down, there was a ragged cheer. It was a popular assassination. Everybody was for it. You know, in Dallas or Texas at that time, the law seemed to be one of in any complex case, you hang the survivor. You know, it was not...
It's 10 years since the Warren Commission submitted its rather confusing report and incomplete in many ways on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Did you get... What were your own feeling about Ruby's action? Did he do this just as a freelance idiot, or was he paid to kill Oswald to keep his mouth shut?
Melvin Belli was his lawyer and presented it to the world as a patriotic gesture, that he so loved the Kennedys. Well, this man had no sense of patriotism, no affection for anybody but himself. I don't think he was organized crime. I don't know. They would not pick a person like Ruby. He was so unstable. I think it was more, I thought it was a celebrity killing kind of thing. And the fact is that it was popular and would make him a big shot if he was the one who assassinated the assassin, so to speak. The more interesting aspect is Oswald's Soviet connections, which we didn't pay much attention to at the time. But Lee Harvey Oswald's, to this day, there's no logical explanation how this man who'd been a Marine attached in U-2 bases, spy plane bases, could defect in the Soviet Union, marry the niece of an intelligence colonel, and then come back to re-defect back to America with his wife, coming back, and never be interrogated by the KGB.
Well, now, were you ever interrogated by the KGB?
Well,
that's a cue for a story. And the story being that you went to Moscow as a correspondent for the Telly, still the Telly at that time. Yeah, still the Telly. And you got into a lot of trouble there, did you not?
I got into trouble in two ways. From writing, they didn't like what I wrote. And I wasn't writing about politics, I was writing about the problems of buying toilet paper. You can't buy toilet paper. You can't, windshield wipers are stolen off the cars. You can't get antifreeze in the winter. You can't get this, that, or the other thing. You can only buy bathing suits in midwinter. You know, socialism or communism doesn't work. The Soviet Union doesn't work. It's fine at building missiles, but not ballpoint pens. Then I got into more trouble, of course, when my translator, who...
Olga.
The infamous... Notorious Olga.
Notorious Olga. Tell me about Olga, because it's...
Well, Olga was my translator, a rather bizarre, eccentric person, a Miss Jean Brodie type of person, who had been was married to an intelligence officer who had been running spies or an espionage ring in Sweden. Anyway, she was assigned to me and then wanted to defect. I immediately, all the antenna rang that this was a setup. I told our intelligence services, and the CIA got onto it. They thought she was a double agent. I overruled them. I felt she was telling the truth. Anyway, and helped her escape. She got a cruise, a tour of the Mediterranean through the KGB. And on my sort of cooperating with RCMP and CIA, she defected in Beirut. And then Western security thought she was an agent.
Double agent.
Double agent. So they took her off and were giving her the Gestapo treatment in Brussels. And meanwhile, I was getting the treatment in Moscow as having seduced this lady or co-opted her into defecting, because nobody in the Soviet propaganda ever wants to leave workers' paradise. They have to be demented or cajoled or whatever. Anyway, I got out finally. They had nothing on me. I think the Soviets, they'd like to have a kernel of truth before they build a case around a foreign journalist. They don't want trouble with journalists. They got them tame. The foreign journalist in Moscow does what he's told to do, does what's expected, and he's fed his crumbs of little interviews with defectors' wives and things like that. Anyway, when I got out, then I found that I was being scrutinized. If she could get out and I could get out, that was proof that we were both being co-opted wittingly or unwittingly.
Was she a double agent?
No.
You don't know, though, do you?
Well, no, I think after all this time, because at the time when she was going to be deported to Argentina or something, I went and more or less gave an ultimatum to our security services that if they had any information, I could accept it. If it was suspicions, then I was going to write the story about how they gave her a Mexican passport and how all the antics of how they had been involved in this escape, and then I said I was going to marry her, and got her to Canada, and lived with her for a couple of years, and then we went our separate ways. She took a PhD at university. it may still be she's a double agent. I may be a Soviet pawn. I don't think I am. Or I would think the evidence would indicate that I'm not.
I bet you the RCMP security think you were at the time.
I don't think so. I think they ruled in my favor and her favor. And now, interestingly enough, she's sort of held up as an example of RCMP security going against the wishes of the CIA and clearing an innocent person.
That's quite dramatic.
It was an interesting story.
And you were married for a couple of years?
Oh, no, we weren't married. I just lived with her, for goodness sakes. No, don't go too far.
I didn't know that Tories lived in sin.
Oh, well, it wasn't. Don't think it would be called sin.
It is by my definition, Peter Worthington.
Well, then you're a hypocrite, Jack.
More with Peter after the break. Worthington, co-founder of the miraculously financially successful Toronto Sun. I should concentrate more on your book, but I don't often get a chance to chat to you. Now, you're praiseworthy of the Telegram. As I recall, that was when, what's his name? That dreadful man. Big fella.
Bassett?
John Bassett.
Oh, Bassett's not a dreadful man. He's a robber baron, but he's...
He and I had a real dust-up on television once.
Oh, yeah, but he remembers it very fondly. I mean...
He remembers it fondly?
Oh, yeah. I mean, but, everybody takes what they want to remember, like you remember it fondly, you know.
Yes, I remember it fondly in a way, because it was the first time he'd really been treated so roughly on television in his life.
Oh, I know.
Anyway, he was the guy whom I said at the time sold the subscription list of the Toronto Telegram for $10 million to the Star and put it out of business, right?
Well, and as he did that, that wasn't necessarily what put it out of business. It was put out of business primarily because the union was going on strike, and it didn't recognize that there was no money in the bank, and if the union fell into his trap.
The old ITU strike.
Yeah.
Is that right?
No. This was one where the Star had got $40 a week, the Telegram was offered 10, and the Telegram guild said...
The Telegram disappears.
Yeah, Telegram
And you and the big fella, what was his name?
Doug Creighton?
Doug Creighton, founded the Toronto Sun.
Right.
On a shoestring.
Oh, on nothing. I mean, on hopes. We tried to raise $1 million, got pledged $700,000, and finally saw $200,000. So basically, the Sun started on a cash outlay of $200,000.
What's it worth today, the Toronto Sun?
Well, we bought the Houston Post for $100 million. So it's worth quite a lot of money now.
Do you mean you had sufficient resources and collateral and borrowing power that you went out, the Toronto Sun owners, went out and bought the Houston Post for $100 million?
Well, then we sold half of it to McLean Hunter, if you remember, for $54 million. And then together we bought the Houston Post. So the Sun is worth quite a lot of money. The Sun Empire is worth a lot of money.
Again, forget the book for the moment. The province is making a pathetic effort, and I say pathetic with goodwill and generosity in my heart, to do a tabloid in Vancouver. Tell them how to do it, because you did it, and most successfully in Toronto.
Well, I wouldn't deign to tell somebody how to do something, but I think if you're going to start a tabloid, you've got to take a chance, and you've got to offend people. You've got to be prepared to. You've got to be controversial. You can't play it a safe way, and you can't become a small broadsheet. If you're going to go tabloid, you might as well go the whole route and have, if I were running the province, I'd have a stronger editorial line, and I'd have columnists in it who have a strong point of view, which is not necessarily the conventional journalistic point of view, and be a little more outrageous, a little more daring, and have a little bit of humor.
We'd have good right-wingers like you and Lubor J. Zink.
Well, Lubor Zink has got a constituency. He doesn't have a change of pace, which I think he should have. He'd be more effective. Lubor is like a charge of the Light Brigade every day. He hurtles down at the barricades, bashes himself, wobbles up to the top of the hill.
You yourself could have been called that on a number of occasions, in charge of the Light Brigade.
No, but I'm eminently reasonable, and
You're so reasonable that on one occasion you called Trudeau a liar in print, and you were charged under the Official Secrets Act for an offence almost... treasonous, I suppose, in its own way.
Well, it was an abuse of the Official Secrets Act, you know, which I believe in the Official Secrets Act, but it's designed originally to go after spies and traitors, not critics and dissidents.
The story's in the book. Tell me a smidgen of it.
Well, it was at a time when security was in the news, and Trudeau was saying that the Soviet Union was a friend of Canada. The KGB was an enemy, but the Soviet Union was a friend.
Oh, yeah.
And I had this top secret RCMP document, which clearly spelled out that the Soviet government policy and the KGB are intertwined. They're indistinguishable from one another. And this had a list of some 16 security breaches in Canada where the Soviets were trying to cajole or bribe or intimidate Canadians into treason. And I wrote about these cases and said that the Prime Minister was not telling the truth, and referred to this document. And whereupon the paper and I were charged under the Official Secrets Act, which, and it's a political decision to lay charges under the Official Secrets Act.
And as I recall, the same material had been dealt with by a television network. I think it was CTV.
CTV had dabbled into some of the cases, which indicated that the document had been widely circulated.
They were not charged, but you were charged.
I was charged, I think, primarily because I think the Trudeau government saw the Sun as an enemy, and they were afraid of leaked documents coming into the Sun, and it was as much an attack on the source, the leaks, as it was on the Sun. And they wanted to get the word out that any documents that came in, they did it at their peril, because we were the one paper that might print the stuff.
What happened to how was the charge disposed of?
Well, the charge was kind of interesting. It carried a 14-year sentence, and it was thrown out in a preliminary hearing. And the highlight, the thing that I remember most about it, was when it was thrown out, and Creighton and I were asked as we left the court how we felt about it. Creighton said, well, I'm relieved that it is, but my co-defendant is going to appeal. But I felt it was a natural platform to go into the whole security thing, which I think is one of the great scandals of the country. We have no security right now. We have never, since the days of Gazenko, caught and prosecuted a genuine Soviet spy or traitor, or whatever you want to call it. We send them home when we catch them, but we have never prosecuted. We're the only country that has never caught and prosecuted a Soviet spy in the post-war years, with the exception of the Gazenko case.
Well, now that we've got our new security legislation and we're going to hand it over to all the boys from Oxford and Cambridge, will that be an improvement?
That thing is even more lethal in my view, because it will, by this time, will be thoroughly penetrated, if anybody wants to penetrate it. You know who's going to be in this sort of political police, which I think becomes very vulnerable. They're going to have to be university-educated, bilingual, da-da-da. And so anybody wanting to get into it, I mean, I think what they should do if they want to have a security service is take everybody who's in that new service now and throw them out and start over again. Because I think Elmer MacKay, the new Solicitor General, is a fine man. He's an incorruptible member of Parliament and the best man in government. And, but I think the first group, God knows what's in it, because I think that's politically oriented, and under the past government would have become a political police. And I think I'd far rather the RCMP in charge of security than these guys.
Yeah, but Elmer MacKay, you say, can be our savior on that particular aspect.
Well, he won't, because they won't tamper with the thing, and they don't understand it, I think. But Elmer MacKay is a
incorruptible
great
member of Parliament.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, we'll take some calls to Peter Worthington. You're not still editor of The Sun, no?
No, Barbara Emile.
Oh, Barbara Emile, you gave her the job, didn't you?
Well, I left the thing, and I recommended her, and she took over. She's not as good looking as I am, but I mean, she makes me seem a bit like a left-winger.
She does, doesn't she? Peter Worthington, after the break. Hey, listen, I read something about Norman Bethune in your book, which of course is sacrilege to say anything against Norman Bethune in BC, because his mother used to, one of our premier's mothers used to roll bandages for Norman Bethune. He's a hero here.
Well, he's a Chinese hero. There's no Canadian hero in him. I mean, it's bizarre that we make a fetish out of Bethune.
Yeah, NDP in British Columbia. have little monuments to him all around the place.
Yeah, so does the federal government. I mean, he sells wheat in China, but I mean, he is an authentic Chinese hero, and the Chinese are smart enough to realize that Canadians all roll over on their back and wave their paws at the mention of Bethune. And the image I like is Mitchell Sharp, you know, with his head bowed at Bethune's grave in China, which is.
What kind of a man was Bethune?
I think Bethune was a drunk, irresponsible, somewhat lecherous, unpleasant, very unpleasant man who was a brave man, innovative surgeon, and he was a dedicated communist. Everything was aimed at the party. He was no humanitarian at all. He was a soldier.
He had great public relations, sir.
Well, after he died.
Yeah. McClure of the moderator of the United Church opened my eyes to Bethune the first time around.
McClure is the Canadian hero in medical. He's the bicycle doctor.
That's what I think.
Great man.
Never got credit enough for everything he did.
None at all. And he was there at the same time, and he, in the same area, was helping the people. Bethune was helping the Chinese army, or the Mao's army.
Let's see what kind of calls you get, Peter. They might be quite civil, or they might be like some of the calls that Vander Zalm got. Go ahead, please.
General Worthington, or Mr. Worthington, rather.
Lieutenant Worthington.
Okay, you look much like your dad, who I served with overseas in England, Europe, and other places.
Oh, really?
Have you a question for him?
Just thank him for being on and still kicking around and pushing the Worthington clan.
Good, thank you. Friend of your father's. Can't do better than that.
No, that's a good start.
We don't normally get Old Home Week for people from Toronto. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to say that it's been very interesting listening to Mr. Worthington talk about his dealing with the communists and the Trudeau government. And it just kind of reinforced a thought that I've had for a while, and that is the possibility of Trudeau being a communist mole. I was wondering what Mr. Worthington thinks about this idea.
This was Gouzenko's theme. You know, Gouzenko was convinced that Trudeau was the Castro of Canada. I don't think... Trudeau was more sympathetic to the left, and he was more generous towards the Soviets and the Chinese and Mao. I don't think he was a mole, but I think he borrowed from he certainly knew his Marxist ideology, and he was trying to make Canada into a neo-Marxist socialist state. I think that's what he would have wanted. But as far as being a KGB kind of working for Moscow, no way. But he was trying to create something called Trudeauism, really, a mixture of all ideologies of the left.
It would have been a very snobbish, class-ridden, neo-Marxist state if it had been done by Trudeau.
They all are. It's the essence of
Marxism. What do you think of his symbolic gesture of being the only head of state of the Western countries to go to Brezhnev's funeral?
Well, if I'd been editor at the Sun, would have attacked it all over the place. It's ridiculous to go there. You know, the others, we should have had no Western people at that funeral. Worse, of course, to me, was going to Cuba at the height of the proxy invasion by the Cuban troops into Angola and embracing Castro, saying Viva Fidel, and praising Castro's grasp on foreign policy.
Yeah, you don't think that the U.S. intelligence services, being a little bit more adept than the Canadian ones, have more information on this, and that it will indeed come to light in the future?
I don't think it'll come to light, and I think we had it all at one time, and I know our security service was very apprehensive about Trudeau, as anybody who knew at that time. But so many years have passed that it's been so covered that I think the truth, whatever it is, will never come out.
Thank you.
The files have been purged.
Good call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, welcome to the West Coast here, Peter.
Oh, it's where I started from.
I'm sorry that you weren't elected. I believe that the Conservative Party should be conservative, and I don't believe in red Tories. I agree with you with our former Prime Minister Joe Hu as the Minister of External Affairs. Also, Flora MacDonald as the Immigration and Employment. My God,
no.
We'll be overrun before we know it.
Well, I hope not, but it puzzles me of why Mulroney would give Clark external affairs unless Clark is going to leave in a couple of years and go to university. I think Clark's a very sad case, really. I mean,
how sad?
Well, here's a man who's reached the pinnacle too soon, He was an overachiever in a sense, and he can go nowhere but down now. I don't think he'll ever go back.
I agree with you. I don't think that he had he grabbed the brass ring and he couldn't hold on. And my last statement is that I feel embarrassed to my country and to the fallen boys in the Second World War, in the invasion of Normandy, when Trudeau went over there and walked on their graves. To me, that was a disgrace.
Yeah, and the year before he shed a tear at the cenotaph, which is
one
a
thing about it,
monstrous
he's
thought.
gone. He won't desecrate the cenotaphs or Remembrance Day.
But you know, the interesting thing with the past election, I think it buried forever the myth that Trudeau was a great prime minister. I think Trudeau was the most divisive, dangerous, intellectually, in a way, morally corrupt administration we've ever had in this country.
One thing too is I agree with you totally. One thing that when he got the Queen's there in Ontario and he was on board the Britannica or the
Britannia,
whatever the name of the vessel
boat,
is, and came off and had a what the hell is it, a
pirouette.
And he walked off the gangplank, waving his hand up in the air with this thing attached to his wrist, and he had nothing but well, how shall I say, a dislike towards royalty. You know, this man is an idiot.
Thank you very much. Mind you, I thought that business of going to the beach at Normandy for a guy who didn't serve in the war and wouldn't go to the cenotaph was appalling.
You know, what was appalling about it, I mean, the gall of the chutzpah of doing it is one thing. But did you notice the media in this country, we didn't do anything about it. We all regurgitated the return to
No screaming about it at all.
Oh, I think it was outrageous.
His name is Peter Worthington. He is still looking for trouble. He is a conservative of the right-wing stripe and a highly successful journalist and newspaper man.
I think I'm very center. You know, I don't really think I'm right-wing.
Oh, you are so too. You're way to the right of me. Don't be daft. I'm a reasonable...
I consider you kind of left, frankly.
I am left.
Yeah, well,
left of centre, but reasonable, decent, honest, humanist. That's what I am.
Those are my words.
Oh. My thanks to Peter Worthington. I'll be back after the break. I thought I had Wayne Gretzky tomorrow morning, but it's not Wayne, it's Walter, his father, who's coming, however, with Jimmy Taylor, a very bright newspaper man from the province yet, too, at 9 a.m. precisely.